Poon and Harry were journalists for Apple Daily, the most outspoken newspaper in Hong Kong. A painful farewell, the headline of its final edition. The popular paper was forced to shut amid China's tightening control over its freest city.
Apple Daily didn't change, but Hong Kong has.
What does the paper's fate tell us about the future of Hong Kong? This isn't a normal day at the office for Poon. The 30-year-old journalist has just learned that the newspaper he worked for a decade would close at midnight.
We just received notice that Apple Daily will publish its final edition tonight, so I'm rushing back to the office. I still have a report pending publication. I'll see if I can make it today. Although we're prepared for its ending, it still feels unreal.
That morning, another staff member from Apple Daily, an editorial writer, was arrested under Hong Kong's national security law. It was imposed by Beijing to outlaw acts of subversion, secession, collusion, and terrorism, punishable by up to life in prison.
We know media workers are at risk, especially those from Apple Daily. It's kind of expected, but journalists are humans too. We don't want it to happen.
Poon is joined by Harry, a photojournalist who's worked for Apple Daily for 7 years.
What's your last assignment today?
None. I'm off duty. I didn't expect things to end today. I regret that none of my photos will be in the final edition.
I understand.
The freezing of its assets made it almost impossible for Apple Daily to continue operating, or even to pay its staff.
I'm bringing my own camera with me to document the historical moments. The ending is not ideal, but I understand the decision made by management because they care a lot about our safety.
As night falls, more and more supporters come to bid a sentimental farewell. It's not just the paper that's coming to an end. All its online content will also no longer be accessible in a few hours' time.
It felt so ironic. So many people read our newspaper and even traveled all the way out here to support us. But in the end, the only reason that forced Apple Daily to shut was government pressure. It breaks my heart even more.
My last report was to test preservatives in fast food. It was published on the website that night, but couldn't be added to the print edition, as there was no more room. My report survived for 3 hours, and then vanished. We couldn't do much on the last day, but during the last few hours we were still journalists. We fulfilled our duties to continue reporting. Perhaps we won't find anywhere else as free to report as here. I haven't kept any printed record of my previous reports. All of them have vanished. But it's not an enormous pity for me personally. I only lost a little. But the whole of Hong Kong had lost numerous important pieces of news and history, as well as a large group of journalists. That's what's most regrettable.
1 million copies of Apple Daily's final edition were published, a record high in this city of 7.5 million people. The popular paper just marked its 26th anniversary 3 days before its closure. Founded shortly before the former British colony was handed over to China, Apple Daily had long been seen as an indicator of Hong Kong's free speech under Beijing's rule. But it was also an outspoken thorn in the authorities' side. Its founder, Jimmy Lai, is currently in jail for organizing illegal protests and charged with collusion under the sweeping national security law. Last year, we spoke to him right after police first raided Apple Daily's newsroom.
I would sink with the ship because this place gave me everything. I'm in debt to this place. I'm very grateful for what this place has given me. I told them that consider your own safety, your conscience, and your obligation to the society. We are not asking you to be the martyr, but do whatever you think is the right thing to do. So we would just continue to do it and test the water.
His media empire did carry on, but was constantly tested. A week before its closure, Apple Daily was dealt another blow. 5 executives were arrested. Reporters' computers were seized. On that night, the remaining editorial board continued publishing. The massive raid was front-page news. Then the government froze its assets, putting the paper's very survival at risk. Even worse, 2 executives were brought to court for conspiracy of collusion, with dozens of Apple Daily articles cited as evidence.
Suddenly, our editor-in-chief became a suspect. We saw him in court. I'd never imagined a reporter having to undergo this. During the court hearing on that day, we realized that reports and commentaries we once deemed ordinary were now problematic. It impacted us a lot. How can the remaining freedom of press and expression protect us? We were frustrated on that day. Journalists can hardly seek protection since then. The red lines are everywhere.
Beijing blamed opposition media for the mass protests in Hong Kong and vowed to clamp down on what it called subversive dissidents. Even months before its closure, rumors and threats of shutting down Apple Daily had struck fear into its journalists. Some left. Others chose to stay until the bitter end, including Poon and Harry.
I seize every last opportunity to perform my duty.
Even before its closure, reporters for opposition media like Apple Daily already encountered many restrictions. Just a day before the newspaper closed, Harry was on his last photo assignment outside a court. All reporters' movements are monitored by the police.
The scope for reporting had changed fundamentally. When the government classifies you as opposition media, it often excludes you from certain press events and information. Therefore, court news and our own interviews are some of the few things we can still cover. The climate has become totally different in the wake of the protests. In the past, we could shoot freely, but now there are always metal barriers everywhere.
Just 2 days later, Harry's life has been turned upside down. He's no longer a photojournalist. This gear, which helped him to record many historical occasions, has to be returned to the now-defunct newspaper outlet.
I can't get used to it. I feel empty. There are so many uncertainties ahead, so many question marks in my head. I haven't been like this for a long time. News in Hong Kong makes me feel really exhausted and powerless. Every time I shoot in the field, there's a great sense of powerlessness. There's nothing else I can do. As a photojournalist, I witnessed the collapse of Hong Kong and its most frustrating era.
Once the most vocal critic in China, the unprecedented death of Apple Daily raises another pressing question. Who's next? The domino effect it triggered intensifies the chill. A number of opposition media outlets have removed commentaries, suspended service, or even left Hong Kong. Yet another editor from the now-shut Apple Daily was arrested at the airport when he tried to leave.
Like the Chinese proverb says, Apple Daily is like the sacrificial animal that's slaughtered to intimidate the other farm animals and make them obey. I'm pessimistic. The stakes are high. We also wonder whether our previous reports will cause us trouble. But we can't be fearful as long as we work in line with journalistic conduct. I had the chance to enjoy the last bite of press freedom. Every journalist is under pressure. I haven't come up with the conclusion of whether I can still be a reporter. Even if I can, it will be very difficult.
This is the first time they've met since Apple Daily closed.
It felt so strange to have nothing to do yesterday on such a busy day for all reporters.
A few of their former colleagues are now on social media to continue reporting as independent journalists. But many are quitting the industry.
How are the photojournalists doing?
Some plan to get a taxi license and be drivers.
Not shooting anymore?
It's hard to find another liberal platform.
An independent journalist must bear all the risks and consequences on their own. The pressure and burden are different.
Yes, in Hong Kong nowadays, any article could draw various accusations. It could be a huge risk.
Is shooting photo safer?
Who knows? Maybe a photo could also be blamed as incitement.
Hong Kong's detour from democracy has forced them to put the brakes on their journalistic endeavors. Does it also spell the end of freedom of the press in their home city?
I don't think Hong Kong's press freedom has died, although it's seriously wounded. I've witnessed the change of Hong Kong, from a place with free speech, where there is basically no taboo for journalists, to a place filled with red lines. Many opinions and acts are now prohibited. It's not only me as a journalist that witnesses it, but all Hong Kongers.
Like Hong Kong itself, Poon and Harry are at a crossroads, and there's no clear path ahead. Though he faces an uncertain future, Poon says he's done his best and has no regrets.